This is Vince Russo, and you're listening to InYourHeadOnline.com.
This is Larry Abisco, and I recommend listening to InYourHeadOnline.com.
All right, and welcome to In Your Head Wrestling Radio. I am the internet icon, handsome Jackie Jones, along with my right-hand man and the enforcer of the Headyverse.
The 1-inch biceps, the power goat. I'm psyched tonight, Jack. I'm psyched.
You should be. And either he's psyched right now or he's wondering why he's here. We have former commentator. He might still be a current commentator. I don't know. We'll ask about that. We have Scott Hudson on the line.
It's always a pleasure to be with Jackie and Big 10-inch here on In Your Head, I got to tell you.
Yeah, he's working his way up. So, you actually did mention, do you still do anything in wrestling?
Other than watch, no. Mm-hmm. No, the ship has sailed on that, Jack. I'm telling you, I'm 51 years old. You know, I let the kids do it. You know, they can have it.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on current commentary?
Oh, wow, commentary. Well, first, Michael Cole sucks. That guy couldn't call a one-horse race. And unfortunately, the best announcer they have on Raw is Byron Saxton, and they don't let him show his stuff. JBL is, you know, we lovingly refer to him as Jiggly Boobs Layfield, and that's being kind. He's terrible. He's horrible. You know, he thinks it's just so de rigueur to refer to Dick Murdoch every third week. I mean, who cares? Nobody. I mean, I love Dick Murdoch personally and professionally, but nobody cares. This is 2015, but they don't know what to do. But then again, I'll give Cole at least a little bit of credit in that he's doing what he's told. If he wasn't doing what he was told, he would be working for Joey Styles at the .com office. And that's sad, is that they've got the best announcer in the last 20 years, you know, on staff, not announcing. So, you know, the guy for New Japan, Mauro, help me out.
Ronaldo?
Yeah. He's the best announcer in wrestling, and it's not even close. Mm-hmm. He's fantastic. The guys on Ring of Honor, Kevin Kelly and the rest of that bunch, they're good too. But the announcing on basically every WWE product across platforms is atrocious. And you know, I got to say this: I'm a huge mark for the King. You know, he could read names out of the phone book, and I would listen. So I love the King. Take him out of that equation. Otherwise, the announcers there are worthless. But to their everlasting credit, they're doing what they're told. Mm-hmm. And you know, Vince is happy as a clam watching ratings tank and viewership and everything else, and gimmick sales go right in the tank.
I do like that line. They're worthless, but to their credit. So.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not just because we have you on here, but it is something we talk about like almost every week. I think, because I've been watching wrestling since I was a kid, it's like the worst time for commentary I can remember in the WWE.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, they I love Hunter. He's fantastic. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He's putting all of that work in with NXT at Full Sail, and they've got a terrific bench of talent, but nobody is bringing up talent at the announcing table. And they think they're going to go out and get guys that are, the sports anchor in Raleigh Durham is going to put in his application to come be, the C-team announcer on Heat. Hell, I don't even know if Heat is still on, but that's what they think they're going to do. They're going to get some guy that's an announcer of, high school lacrosse, of some fishing tournament, of some, C-market television sports weekend anchor, and just say, oh, he's an announcer, we can teach him wrestling. It doesn't work that way. And it's coming home to roost. They don't have guys that have gone out and applied their trade like, pump my own horn here, like I did, working for $5 a month for 5 years doing indie wrestling in Georgia, learning the sport and learning how to announce and learning television and all of that before the break came with WCW, and everybody else did the same thing, like Jim Ross did, like Lance did, like Dave Brown did. God, going all the way back like Ed Capel did and Gordon Solie, they're looking for peanuts and had a real job and did it because they loved the sport. And Joey, same way, Joey Styles, they don't have people like that. They think they're just going to go get, again, some guy out of the Shreveport, the weekend sports anchor on Channel 8 who's going to come in and, he's an announcer, we'll teach him wrestling, and then you get this, you get Michael Cole.
That whole philosophy has always been strange to me. That like if you almost like look down upon if you love wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you this, Jack. When Dusty, God rest his soul, he was the greatest. When Dusty had his school and promotion around Atlanta called Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, and but it was a school and they ran shows. Whenever he would do. He would start a class. I think his class was like 12 weeks. He would have me and Steve Prazak, my best friend in the world, lives in Atlanta. He would have us come in for a day and just talk about promos, not to teach them how to do promos. You can't teach that in a day. You can't teach that, honestly, but to teach them how to work with an announcer. And Steve and I are both marks for the business, so we would do whatever Dusty said, and we'd stand there and hold the mic and ask questions and give it back, and and we would work for it. And it was a day, but it was a full 10-hour day just on how to do promos with an announcer. And nobody does that anymore. I guarantee you. You go put any of those guys at NXT who ripped up abs and long hair and look like models, male and female. Go say, okay, there's Joey Styles holding a mic. Go cut a promo, and they'll fall on the ground crying. And because nobody teaches that anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean that's something a lot of people talk about is scripted promos versus, like you're saying, just learning to be able to do it on the fly. And because usually if someone does have a great promo, like in modern time, you find out it is something like they came up on their own. Is there really any like benefit to a scripted promo? I don't. I mean, if I listen to Austin,
that's a great question, and the answer is like anything else. It depends. In WCW, and now, God, this will make you feel ridiculously old. WCW ended almost 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. But when I was in WCW, and I was in WCW 6 years rather, when Vince got there, when Vince Russo got there with Ed Ferrara and Bill Banks and that crowd, that's when we started using scripted promos. But for the most part, it was worth it because the promos, if you had put a live mic in front of fill-in-the-blank guy, it would have been horrific because they never learned how to do them. You give them a script, they can deliver the words and make it sound good enough. But, the Arn Andersons and Austin Idols and Ric Flairs and Jerry Lawlers, the guys that you could just, watch the red light turn on and they could go for, 10 minutes and never blink, those days were over by then. So scripted promos work if the talent can't do a promo off the cuff. And, as we head into, coming up on 2016, the guys that can do that are fewer and farther between. Punk may have been the last person that I would trust, talent-wise, because obviously I would trust Paul Lee or Dutch Mantel or somebody like that. But as far as in-ring talent, Punk may be the last guy in the WWE that I would have trusted to say, all right, go out and cut a promo, you've got 8 minutes, and just trust him that he's going to do the right thing and say the right words and get everything over. I don't think anybody else could do it.
Well, another thing I would think is you wouldn't even know if someone else could do it because there's no platform for them to do it. So if someone was
That's
great
exactly
at
right.
it, they wouldn't get a chance to show it.
Yep, exactly right.
There was before I get off the commentaries, there was something I wanted to bring up. Was I don't know if anyone caught it. Was JBL last night? He said, "Why don't you guys try this at home?" And it was I think it was a power bomb or something by Cesaro, and I was just like, why would someone say that on the commentary to actually try one of the moves at home?
Yeah, why can't it be like a side headlock? You can't really do a whole lot of damage with that.
Yeah.
And you got to do like a shooting star press. Hey kids, we're out in the backyard and get on top of the storage shed. See if you can hit a shooting star or a Styles clash off the top rope. That'd be great.
Yeah. It was funny because you could tell right away everyone there was just it was a very awkward moment. They were just like,
Well, probably because Vince was screaming in his ear, or whoever's working gorilla position up there now. Have you lost your mind? Tell them to do a Styles Clash at the top of the storage shed? Jesus, the last thing we need, and he's listening.
Now, you mentioned Dusty and stuff. How did you actually get in the business? And was it always to be a commentator? Did you want to be a wrestler or anything like that?
Oh God, Jack. All right, here we go. I'm 51, so I go back to 1970, watching WRBL, Channel 3 in Columbus, Georgia, with my grandfather. When we would go visit him a couple hours away, and on those Saturday afternoons at 4:00, live wrestling every Saturday at 4 on Channel 3, and I would watch it with him, and I just got hooked, with guys like Dick Steinborn, Bill Dromo, Bob Armstrong, Oki Shikina, all those guys back then, El Mongol, that troupe from Georgia Championship days back in 1970. So I was a fan from then forward, period. Just a complete mark. It wasn't like easing in. It was never heard of it, watched it once, I'm in, and still am for, 45 years. And so as luck turned out, I ended up becoming a disc jockey down in my hometown in South Georgia, and played country music, played adult contemporary, played rock and roll, had a 100,000 watt station where I played rock and roll for the nighttime shift, did good numbers and all that. So it was fun back in the 80s. And one day the station manager came up and said, "Didn't you play football?" I said, I did, because I played in high school and college. And he goes, "Well, I'm going to need somebody to do the high school football games. I'm tired. I've been doing them. I'm tired of doing it. I want you to do it." Terrific. I'd never done it in my life. I'd played it, but never announced it. So I started doing that back in, 86 maybe. And that worked. Everything went well, and then moved to Atlanta. And that's when the magic happened. Steve Prazak, who was with ECW for a long time as a backstage interviewer, he and I are best friends in the world. And he and I went to an indie show out in Carrollton, and whoever the ring announcer was, some schlub, messed up like every other name, got every other name wrong. It was kind of like guys by girls' names. And at the end of the show, I went up to the promoter, a guy named Joe Pedicino, whom I did not know, and I said, "Joe, I'm Scott Hudson. I don't know what you're paying that stiff, but I'll do it for nothing." And he said, "You're hired." We're running the show in Luthersville next Tuesday. I said, "I'll be there." And off we go. And after I did the first show, he came up and said, "You've done this before." I said, "I actually haven't, but I've done this and this and this." And he had an idea that Steve and I would be a complete uber babyface and a stupid, snarky heel, and argue back and forth on his TV show that he had in Atlanta. There was like 8 hours of wrestling every Saturday night on Channel 69 in Atlanta. And one of those hours was the local Georgia show. And I went from paying to get into a show in Carrollton to being on the TV show 2 weeks later, and never looked back.
Now, Prazak, you mentioned, though. Didn't you guys both work in Global?
Well, yeah, we were, and that was not long thereafter. That was Pedicino's gimmick too. With on ESPN, we had a daily show, believe it or not, on ESPN. Right. God, that was hell to tape. But Steve and I were both on the ESPN show. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I remember I was a big fan of Global because it came on exactly as soon as I got home from school. So I get home and turn on and watch Global, and I was
great. That's fantastic. Get home from school. That's great. Are you in graduate school?
Exactly. I was in high school,
medical school,
into my mid-30s. Yeah. But it was
fourth grade.
I think it might have been junior high. But I really enjoyed it, and so many names came out of Global and went on to big fame and everything. But at the time, did you really think this was a new promotion that was really going to take off?
Well, here's the thing. I don't know that I've told this story if I've told her, I can't remember the last time I told her that wasn't, over a couple of drinks at a bar in Buckhead. But when, Joe put Steve and I on the show, then not long thereafter, he put Steve and I as the commentary team on the Georgia show. So we were doing the North Georgia Wrestling, Georgia All-Star Wrestling, and then it changed into North Georgia Wrestling Alliance. And out of nowhere, I mean, again, paying to get into the show in Carrollton, 2 weeks later I'm on TV, and like 6 months later I'm on ESPN. And when he told me about all of this, Joe Pedicino, he gave me I've got money, and you remember all this, Jack. I mean, I don't know if you'd be looking at the sheets back then. He had $25 million. Famously, he had $25 million backing this new wrestling group. And to Joe's everlasting credit, and he's a saint on earth. I love Joe. Still stay in touch with him. He's the greatest. But he got taken just hook, line, and sinker by one of these, Nigerian prince. All of our money is on a ship that they won't let pull into port. And if you give me your bank account number, I'll give you $1 million and all this other shit. That's what he got rooked into. And he thought that he had $25 million to start the company. And then when he started, making business deals and signing contracts, and it turned out that he was being worked, he found other investors. So he went from having like $25 million, which never existed, to next to nothing to start the company. But he had signed the contracts and, was a man of his word, and we did the best we could. So yeah, if he had the $25 million, yeah, we would have made it. Mm-hmm. But he didn't, and the money eventually ran out. Mm-hmm. What money he had, it was making a little bit of money with licensing and the broadcast rights and what precious few house shows they ran, but it just could never get out of the blocks because they had no real startup capital to do anything other than a TV show. And there's, you'll know there's just no money in TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember there was a cartel gimmick, which I believe on earlier editions of In Your Head, we've been doing the show since 2005, I wrongly said that you ended up being the leader, because I looked this up before the show, because I remember I usually just go by memory on this stuff, and I was like, I better look this up to make sure he really was, and I was like, oh no, he wasn't. But
no.
on earlier ones, it was.
I think that was Max Andrews. Wasn't he the leader of the cartel?
Yeah, that's what I found that out earlier, but yeah.
Max was a great guy too, but no, not me.
Mm-hmm. That was the only time I got to see Norman the Lunatic do his Makhan Singh gimmick. I heard it was really big up in Canada, but it was the only time I get to see him do that. I was always a fan of his.
Talented guy, great guy, talented fellow. That gimmick was kind of a strange to hear this just this big fat jovial nice sweetheart of a guy trying to be some Middle Eastern terrorist. I didn't quite get that, but
yeah,
he made it work.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of stuff too in Global that it was like the first time I saw guys doing really like dives off the top rope when you had like Sean Waltman at the time and Jerry Lynn. That was great stuff.
I'm sorry, say that one more time, Jack.
I was just saying that was like that was really great stuff at the time and ahead of its time. And like when you were seeing stuff like that, did you think this is where these guys are going to go on to big things, or what were your opinions on that kind of wrestling?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Jerry Lynn and Sean Waltman were on their way and were going to be huge stars. They were so talented, and Sean, whom I just adore, just a great guy, was so young. I remember we hadn't been doing Global a few months. I mean, you can look at the dates. I can't remember, but it wasn't long. And we had his 18th birthday party at a Denny's next to the Roadway Inn down the road from the Sportatorium where we taped the show. I mean, so he came in 18 years old. Mm-hmm. I remember that night. A quick story. I remember that night. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's Lightning Kid's birthday. We're going to have a thing at Denny's next to the hotel at the Roadway Inn." And so we go down there, and there's this whole group of the Global guys, giving Sean a hard time about turning 18 and all this other. And that's on one end of the Denny's, and on the other end of the Denny's is Liza Minnelli. and her entourage, because she had just played some show in Dallas, and there she is at the Denny's next to the Roadway Inn in South Dallas. So it was the Global crew on one end and the Liza Minnelli entourage on the other. That was a weird night.
Inchman, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I got a question from Facebook. Jay Beefington, he wants to know, what did you know about the possible Bischoff buyout of WCW and where you figured in to do the commentary for it?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a flash forward there from from that night in Dallas. That's a great question. That's one of my favorite stories from WCW. You know, we to put it into context, WCW, as part of the Time Warner AOL corporate family, when it was part of Turner, we were safe. We were just like a baby in mother's arms. He was never going to do, he being Ted Turner, never going to do anything to hurt us. But the minute he lost his power and he brought in this stupid stiff named Jamie Kellner to run things, Jamie Kellner is an idiot, a 5-star, 4-alarm, card-toting moron, came in and decided the first thing he wanted to do was just divest this company he was running of all things to do with pro wrestling. And because he didn't like the demographic, you know, I don't like money, so I'm going to get rid of this property. So that was, I guess, I can't think of any other reason to do it, but he ended up being gone within 6 months. But in his 6 months, he destroyed the company. When he did that, the company went from being the highest rated show on 2 networks that were part of the Turner family, which was TNT and TBS, and doing house show business and pay-per-view business. And people look back at it now and think, oh, God, WCW was so horrible and the ratings were so bad. They were higher then than Raw is now. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Mm-hmm. And that was with Raw beating our ass like a drum because they were putting on really good television. But regardless, so the company just became completely devalued. It had talent contracts and, you know, it had some value, but then he canceled television. When it was for sale, he was trying to get rid of the company. He goes, oh, and by the way, no television rights with this. No syndicated rights, no international rights, no TBS, no TNT. You just get the company. You're on your own to go find something else. Well, there went the value of the company from $50 million to, you know, nothing, to a fire sale. And Eric, to his everlasting credit, tried to put together a deal with something called Fuchsia Media to buy it. And Fuchsia, from what we heard, I mean, those guys came in a couple of nitros with Eric, you know, to see the product and to see how it operated and all this. So it was doing their due diligence. And my gut feeling, and based on talking to Eric back then and talking to him since, is that they were on board. Yeah, we can make some money with this. We can make a go of this. And then Kellner, the idiot, canceled television. So it had no avenue to promote the product. And so the company just became completely worthless, except for its hard assets like rings and, you know, buildings and stuff. So, you know, Fuchsia Media backed out completely. And I don't blame them. Eric didn't either. You know, the company had no value after that, after Kellner canceled television. And so there we went, and then we were up at, you know, basically like a rummage sale for the WWF to come in and buy us.
Yeah, I mention this sometimes when people say there's no chance, you know, that Raw would go away, because it's, even though the ratings are really terrible compared to years before, it's still the number one thing on USA. And I always say, well, so wasn't WCW. You know, anything can happen. But
yep, that's right.
When you mentioned they had all the stuff, you know, just the rings and all that stuff. What happened to all that? Did WWE buy all that, or like, is it still somewhere?
They got it. They got all of it. I don't know what happened to it. I mean, you know, they bought us out. We did the last Nitro down there in Panama City Beach, and, you know, we all got, you know, officially fired the next Tuesday, and, you know, marched around and signed paperwork, and, you know, had security escort us off the property back to our cars, and we had to leave right then and never look back. So all that stuff was still in the building when I left, but they owned it. We didn't own the building. We rented the building, but everything in there was then WWF property. So, God knows. I'm sure it's sitting somewhere.
And you mentioned Sheets earlier, and that time period was when I was really, reading all the Wrestling Observers and the Torches and listening to Meltzer every day on Yada. And, they'd have Eric Bischoff on and different people. And they'd mentioned that a lot of the wrestlers, up until, they actually sold WCW, still thought maybe it was just an angle, like Disco Inferno and people. Is that true? And, do you remember?
Well, I don't know what people thought, but I can tell you that it wouldn't surprise me if people thought that, because up until, let's see, obviously Nitro was on a Monday night. Up until that Thursday before, so what's that, 4 days before, there was no definitive word. And the only reason I knew was because Tony Schiavone called me and told me. If Tony hadn't called me and said, hey, Monday's our last show, we're done, Vince is buying us out, and there's no next show, there's no more house shows, there's no more pay-per-view, it's over. The only reason I knew was Tony called me. If I hadn't heard it from him, I might have showed up in Panama City Beach thinking, okay, well, what's travel for next Monday? Where's the next pay-per-view? I forget. I might have wondered. But so the fact that a lot of talent may have thought it was an angle or was somehow going to be worked out otherwise doesn't surprise me at all. I was lucky enough to, be friends with Tony, and he told me. He told all of us. He told, Mike and, Mark and everybody else that, this is it.
Now, we did skip ahead a lot there. Just from your global from your global days to even go into WCW.
Yeah.
Had you worked in wrestling? That's like an 8-year span in between there.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Had you still worked in wrestling from when Global ended?
Oh yeah.
WCW?
Well, when I was doing Global, I was still doing the Georgia show with Prazak here in Atlanta, and so Global came and went in about a year and a half for me, and then it became, when the money ran out, it became basically a Texas based, from all the talent was from Texas, and everything was Texas. And so I'm still doing Georgia. I was doing both at the same time, and then when Global goes away, I'm still doing Georgia. And Steve and I were doing Georgia until 1995. And, it's, back in the day, God, to coin a phrase, there was this, this conspiracy theory about what was Scott Hudson's real job. He had this mysterious real job with the government, and what did he do? And I'm still not allowed to go into a lot of detail about it, but suffice to say that I had a real job that I had been to college for 1,000 years, and I did wrestling even up until the end of WCW and through TNA just as a hobby. I had a career, and still do. And I had gone to work for the feds back in 94, and in December of 95, we were doing a, like any other company, you do a holiday party, a holiday thing. And with us, it was a lunchtime thing. And so I get Employee of the Year, for better or for worse. I'm Employee of the Year. So it's this swanky restaurant in downtown Atlanta, and I go up and get my award, and sit back down with my friends and my coworkers, and all of a sudden the maitre d' comes over and goes, "Are you Mr. Hudson?" I said, "Yeah," and he said, "I've got a phone call for you at the front." There's no cell phones back then. This is 1995. So I go back up to the front, and it was Diamond Dallas Page. And I had gotten to know Page and God rest his soul, Chris Canyon and Disco and Glacier and Brian Clark and a bunch of guys, because they liked the Georgia show. They would ask us over to one of their houses to watch pay-per-views and stuff. So Page said, "Scott, I got somebody who wants to talk to you," and it was Eric. He said, "It's Eric Bischoff. I know your work. I've watched your work. We've got a spot open. I think you do well. Can you come audition next Monday?" I said, "Sure." And so that was it. I walked in and auditioned on Monday, got the spot, and stayed there from December of 95 until the bitter end.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you get along with Bischoff? apparently he was a fan of your work. Mm-hmm.
I love Eric. He was always good to me. Never had a crossword. Never had anything to say to me except, good advice or just talking about the business or the history of the business. He was a historian of at least the AWA days. So no, I absolutely nothing but positive memories and respect for Eric. Yeah. He was terrific.
Now, obviously, you mentioned earlier about in WWF, WWE, and people always talk about it. Someone being in your ear and yelling at you what to talk about. In WCW, how was that for a commentator? Did people did they give you advice or tell you what to do, or did they just leave you alone?
When in the IFB, the earpiece that you're wearing, it was rare that I heard anything. Mm-hmm. That wasn't floor direction. Like we'd go to a commercial and then I'd hear, Wendy Turner or somebody come in and say, okay, when we come back, guys, we're going to do the 1, 2, and 3, and just look at your format. We're at segment number 72 when we come out of this spot. So you guys ready? All right, we got about 2 minutes. That kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Not about what to say or what to put over. The only time I ever heard anything like that was with Terry Taylor when he was running the gorilla position for WCW. Terry's thing, and God love him, thank God he did this. He was always in my ear and just say, ask the question. That's all he would ever say. Ask the question. So if you go back and listen to that commentary, I'm sure, Brain and Tony and Mark and Mike and Legend and everybody else were forever asking questions. What's going to happen next? What does he mean? What are his motivations? Why is she here? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Terry's big thing was ask the question. Don't answer it. Just ask it. Mm-hmm. So that was about the only thing I ever heard that wasn't floor direction during a commercial break was Terry going, ask the question, ask the question.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to ask you to say what you do, but you mentioned your real career, your real job, and and I've actually heard Bobby Heenan, who I'm a big fan of Bobby Heenan, but he's actually talked bad about you, maybe on the show, and he said that part of the thing he didn't like about you was that you did have another job and that you didn't ask for more money because he said that hurt everybody. At the time when you were working with him, did you get along okay, or was this something?
I got along great with Bobby. Mm-hmm. I'll say this. I know that he's had health issues, and I've seen the photos, the same photos you guys have seen, and he's struggling and he's fighting so hard, and I love the guy, and I'm such a fan of his. And I hope that he, whatever time he's got left, and I hope it's another 40 years. I hope it's healthy and full of life for him. But we got along great. I have vivid memories of Bobby and working with him on Worldwide, and nothing but positive memories of him and all of that stuff. And I heard all that, about, the fact that I'm sitting at Bobby's working one show a week for WCW and making $250,000 or whatever. And I'm working 10 shows for, 10% of that or whatever it was. That devalued the announce crew. Nothing prevented him from doing that. He's working an hour a week. He could have gone out and gotten another job somewhere and gone to college, and like I did. But he was, he was terrific to me. He was funny. He was incredibly smart. I mean, you can't be that acerbic and funny without having at your core an incredible intelligence, and Bobby did. He was a wonderful partner and fun to work with, and a really, really smart, talented man.
Mm-hmm. And I was glad to hear you talk about being friends with Schiavone, because I think he gets a totally bad rap today. So many people say he's one of the worst commentators, and I was always a Tony Schiavone fan, and I think you can't blame the commentator for if the show's not doing well, or the show's not great.
True. That's exactly right. First off, I would put, my favorite announcer of all time is Lance Russell. And I don't think anybody has ever touched Lance Russell as an announcer. And second, I also have to put Jim Ross. Those two, I can't imagine anybody being better than either of those two men. And third, I put Tony. Forgetting the fact that, we worked together and we got along, and I love him to death, and he was a mentor and my boss. But forget all that. That's from 1996, basically forward. Go back to, 1984 to 1996. That 12-year run, he was incredible. And people forget that. And he angles over. He seemed like a common man behind the stick, but he was tough when he needed to be. He made you feel, the passion of the performers. He made you understand the angle, and he didn't have to force it down your throat. But I would put Tony up there in my personal top 3, behind Lance and Jim. God love them, but I would put Tony up there. I think the world of him.
Mm-hmm. I have my own opinions on this, but what do you think makes Lance Russell and Jim Ross so special?
Well, for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
First off, if you go back and I guess it's still on YouTube. It's been out there for a while, and you can ask my darling patient wife, Casey. I'll do this every now and then. Go back and watch some Jim Ross commentary from the UWF, the old Mid-South territory, especially when Eddie Gilbert turns on Cowboy Bill Watts with Nikita Koloff and Ivan Koloff and Korsita Kurchenko and all of that stuff. And you hear real passion. You hear a man that's a fan of the business and a mark for Bill Watts and somebody that hates Eddie Gilbert calling the show. And he loved all those guys. I know that. Mm-hmm. But he was so in the moment that it felt like you were listening to yourself call what you saw, because he was so much a fan and so much a viewer of what you were seeing. Lance was complete other direction. Lance was not the straight man, but Lance was this pillar. I mean, if you can picture like some, like concrete pillar that's, 5 by 5 by 5 that's buried into a 20-foot piling in the ground. That's what Lance Russell was. And everything else just circulated around him. And he never lost his composure, and he never lost the, come on, Jerry, that kind of stuff. It was like when it would get too ridiculous, you could always count on Lance to say, that's probably a little bit more than it should have been, ladies and gentlemen. And it was just wonderful, and it brought people into the Mid-South Coliseum back then. And I to this day, I'll go back and watch Lance do the Jerry Lawler, Austin Idol, Tommy Rich, Paulie Dangerous stuff that ended up with King getting his head shaved in the Mid-South Coliseum. And just hearing Lance call that, you could just hear the disgust and the disdain for Austin Idol and Tommy Rich in his voice, and knowing full well that he knows what's going on. He's probably on the booking meeting, but you could just hear it, that passion. But it wasn't over-the-top screaming like what Jim did. It was, again, that concrete pillar, and he just almost like he was on the verge of tears. He was so upset about all that's happening to the King. Just good stuff. Brought me in, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, and he's just a very likable person.
Oh, yeah, personally, yeah, and he was every man. He was the news anchor there on Channel 5, and Dave was the weather guy. Mm-hmm. So they Bobby would hate this. They had real jobs, and they did wrestling, on the weekends.
I think as far as adding drama to a match, I don't think anyone's better than Jim Ross.
Yeah,
and I think that's.
And when you become a meme as a wrestling announcer for non-wrestling stuff, you have broached the Rubicon there. And I mean, how many times do we see in a meme of something wholly unrelated to wrestling? It'll say, by God, King, that's somebody's baby boy. That's what Jim Ross is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to even think of a lot of the like a Steve Austin match or something with Mick Foley, any of like that Attitude Era stuff without Jim Ross's commentary in your head.
Absolutely. He was as big a part of that as any in-ring talent. No question.
Yeah. So when you're on you're in WCW and Nitro's just is so huge, and wrestling so huge at that time.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that in a few years most of these promotions will be gone and there'll just be one? And did that ever cross your mind?
No, never. And Eric will tell you this. I think Eric has said this. I don't think he denies it. I'm sure he doesn't believe it now. And now that we know how the end of the book was written, but there was a time where he was convinced, and he would tell us that we're going to run them out of business.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to run the WWE out of business. Whatever you do, that's your goal. Make our quarter-hour segment better be better than theirs because we're going to run them out of business.
Mm-hmm. Nope.
And we damn sure almost did.
Mm-hmm. Now he'll say now that wasn't necessarily his goal. He really just wanted Nitro to be big, but I know a lot of people at the time say that was his goal, and he would say that. So, did he? You just mentioned, you brought that up, but do you think that was something that he really wanted to do? Was not necessarily just make Nitro and WCW the main show, but to actually put the WWE out of business?
Well, if that's not your goal, then you shouldn't be in television. It's not that you shouldn't be in business so much, because you don't want to, you don't run everybody out of business, because then the town dries up and there's nothing left. But when it comes to television like that, especially wrestling, yeah. I mean, did you think the NFL wanted to run the USFL out of business? Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And like anything else, Eric and Vince both have, egos, like anybody that runs big companies like that. In hindsight, what Eric will tell you, I've never had this discussion with him, but I can tell you that personal opinion, that would have been the worst thing in the world for either one of us to go out of business, because competition made everybody better, and that's been borne out by what happened, after we went under.
Mm-hmm.
You think about this, guys. Go back to 2000, 1999, when the Monday Night War was just hot, just the hottest thing in the world. There were weeks when we would do segments or even hours where if you added up both shares, we had 10 million people watching both shows. You add up our number and their number, and there's 10 million people. Well, those people didn't die. They just stopped watching because, number one, there's a million channels now, and there wasn't back then, but the product got less interesting. But on top of everything else, not only did the WWE not hold their audience from then, they lost it and lost to less than we were doing. So, and it was the competition that made them better, and it made us better.
Yeah. It's weird because a lot of times, like the show, it's hard sometimes to get through a 3-hour Raw. It just seems so long. It's like a chore. And never mind then try to think of I'm gonna watch SmackDown and all these other shows. But back then, I mean, as a wrestling fan, I'd record Raw, I'd watch Nitro, watch it immediately after it was over, watch ECW when it was. I'd watch everything I could think of and not even think I'm not in the mood. I'd look forward to watching all of this.
Yeah, that's because it was better. It's like today. I came back to my house after work, and I looked at my through my TiVo stuff, and I had 4 Ring of Honors on there and 4 New Japans and Raw for Monday night, and I had watched SmackDown over the weekend. And I thought, God, here I am. I've got, whatever that turns out to be, 11 hours of wrestling to watch. I can't watch that. So I just deleted them all. I said, I'll just start over. Because I just don't have time. It's not the appointment television that it used to be. And I never thought I would be that way. I remember, literally crying, as a kid, if my mom and dad and I were out at the, out grocery shopping or something, and it was getting too close to 6 o'clock on Saturday night. And I'm like, we got to check out, we got to check out. We've got, we're 6 minutes from the house and it's 10 of, we've got to get back by 6 o'clock. I don't know what y'all are doing, but hurry up. And, those times are gone for me. And I would love to have them back, but I hope they're there for some folks.
Yeah. That's exactly what talked about a lot on the shows. I grew up just anything I could find, it would be, some local thing on some weird cable channel or I remember actually when ECW stopped airing on my, I actually called up the channel and was like, well, what's going on? I can't imagine doing that today. I just would be like, oh, I guess this is not on.
I got you beat there. Prazak and I would go to a place called Nippon Daido, which is a Japanese grocery store up in the Chamblee area on Beaufort Highway, north of Atlanta. And they would get on a week's delay New Japan and All Japan television shows at the grocery store. Somebody would record them over there and ship them over, and the grocery store would rent them, and it was like $2 to rent each. And we would go in and rent. He would rent one, and I would rent the other, and then we'd swap and then take them back the next day. And so that's how we saw New Japan and All Japan back in the late '80s, and up to '92 and '93. I can't imagine going to that much trouble, to watch Japanese wrestling. I couldn't understand. I don't speak Japanese, but I just had to watch.
Mm-hmm. There was actually during the Nitro days, it was like a real high. It wasn't any actual channel. It was just one of the numbers on my cable box, and by accident one time I found out that an hour, maybe a half hour before every Nitro, I'd get this feed from, and it was, I don't know if it was from the production truck or what, of Nitro, and so I'd see the dark. It would just be one stationary camera, and it would be the dark match, and then you would hear it'd be like I think it was Shivani, Eric Bischoff, and Heenan, and they'd just be talking without even thinking anyone's hearing them. And I wish I would have recorded all that because it was great stuff. I didn't really.
Probably would have to hit the old bleep button several times. I would think.
I was more worried just listening to them talk than whatever was happening in the ring.
Uh-huh.
But
it was an awful lot of Jerry Flynn and high voltage matches.
Yeah, I remember there was one time there was an actual title change. It was like. I think it was the one-man gang lost the U.S. belt to Conan on a dark match before Nitro, and it was very strange. But
good grief!
I always wondered what happened to Jerry Flynn.
Great guy, tough as hell guy. I don't know. He, I like that guy a ton. He just didn't have a whole lot of charisma, but boy, he was a great athlete.
Mm-hmm. That's another thing is I remember all those guys. They're obviously not main event guys, just like opening match guys and stuff. But I remember all those characters, and I don't know if I might remember some of the guys from today, but I don't know.
Well, they ended up on Saturday night.
Yes.
Which ended up being the show that Mike and I did, and then Dusty and I did, and then Legend and I did. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we saw an awful lot of high voltage and Tough Tom and Mean Mike and.
Yeah.
Hole-in-one Darso and all those guys.
I was a big fan of the Hole-in-one gimmick. I was actually I mentioned this a lot on the show, I actually thought it was a good gimmick, and I thought the guy was a really good wrestler, was the Gambler.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That, I don't know who he was, and as we sit here in November 2015, I've never met the guy.
Oh, okay,
never been in the same room with him, as far as I know.
He was
a hell of a good hand.
Yeah, and I
he would come out with the gimmick on, and then flip the deck of cards out. Yeah,
and I just thought that was a good gimmick, and he had a cool look, and I just liked that guy. And
he was in shape. I mean, there's nothing wrong with him.
Mm-hmm. I've never been able to track him down. If the Gambler's listening or anybody knows the whereabouts, I would love to have the Gambler on the show.
Yeah, that's they're probably he's probably headlining against Jerry Flynn at the Ybor City, National Guard Armory outside of Tampa this weekend.
Exactly. Now, another commentator a lot of people are not fans of is Mark Madden. Just what are your opinions working with Mark Madden?
Well, first off, I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm completely biased for Mark. I love Mark. I've known him for 15 years before we started doing TV together, as we were all writing for the Sheets together back in the 80s. And, I understand how his personality as he's a talk radio guy. He's a sports talk radio guy. So that abrasive personality, does fantastic on radio, and he does fantastic on radio. But, I can see how that doesn't necessarily translate to television, because if you look at the people that start off in radio, and when they try to make the transition to television, it doesn't necessarily go all that great, because that you learn, and I don't know if you guys have ever done radio other than in your head radio, but when you're on radio, you oversell everything. Where on TV, you can sometimes let the image tell the story. Mm-hmm. And Mark might have fallen into that trap that he felt like there wasn't, a moment of silence that he didn't need to be filling. But the thing is, when he did it, he was hysterical. I mean, he's one of those guys. I don't know if you guys have ever hung out with him, but he could come in and just read the label off the back of a bottle of shampoo and have me cracking up and laying on the ground laughing. Mm-hmm. He's just one of those guys. I think the guy's just hysterical. Yeah. But I can see how a lot of folks would not appreciate that talent as a television commentator. But I'm not the one to ask. I love Mark.
Yeah. I'm usually about the only person who is also a fan of Mark, usually in like a wrestling chat room or anything around the show. I enjoyed his commentary too. I always remember him yelling fat ass fly when Hugh Morris was doing
fat ass fly, yeah. And Uchi Bucci's Tony or whatever it was, and
yeah, all the Kevin Smith.
Yeah, he had all of his catchphrases. Yeah, he was hysterical. Mm-hmm.
So, how did it come about you commentating on Nitro with no shirt on?
Oh, first off, I'm about 50 pounds lighter than I was then. I'd like to point that out. I'm in much, much, much better shape. Mm-hmm. But we were doing the show, and like anything else, I'm not offended by saying I am a complete and utter Mark. I wear that badge proudly. When we show one week, this is when Vince Russo was in, and something happened, and I can't remember what it was, but Vince got his shirt ripped off, and he was just getting waylaid by somebody in there. Whoever it was, God knows, probably Scotty Steiner or whoever, ripped his shirt off and just beat the hell out of him. So I made some crack about, on behalf of the entire Turner Time Warner family, we apologize for you having to see this, the bug whip arms of Vince Russo live on cable broadcast television. And I just said that just as a joke because he's the heel, and then, we're supposed to get heat on the heels. Well, the next Monday, they were doing, pre-tapes and everything, and he goes, Scott, I want you to do the show without your shirt on. I said, what on earth for? And he said, well, you made one of you guys, he didn't even know it was me, one of you guys made the crack about my buggy whip arm, so it's going to be me getting heat on you guys for making fun of me, so you have to announce without your shirt on. I said, okay, whatever, great. I said, the only thing I'll ask is, can I wear a tie? Because I always wear a tie on the show. I said, well, how about I do it without a shirt, without a coat, but I'm wearing a tie, which looks even more stupid. He goes, I love it. Go with it. So that was it. And so Mark and Tony both told him no. They wouldn't do it. So that's why that image is out there with me and Tony and Mark, because they refused to do it, and I did it. I didn't care. Mm-hmm. It was like what I'm it's going to hurt my reputation. Good grief. So I did it, and I'll say this. I am like, this is TMI, big time. So you might want to edit this out in post. But I'm like a really hairy guy. I'm like Dutch Mantel hairy. If I don't take care of myself and do some, creative landscaping, I look like George Steele. So I didn't get a heads up from Vince until the day of the show. So I walk out there and I'm just covered in this hair, like Dutch Mantel. And on my way to the ring, Vince grabs me, after he already knows that I'm the only one doing the bit that he wants. And he just goes, hey, Scott, you can't wear that sweater. Because I was that hairy. I said, fantastic. I'll see you at ringside. And then off we go. So that's why it was Vince. And again, I love Vince. Like Eric, I would follow him into battle. He was great to me.
Mm-hmm. So, when Russo came into WCW, and they kind of rebooted the show, and was everyone on board with him to begin with?
To begin with, yeah, absolutely. Everybody had heard, what the turnaround that was happening with the Attitude Era in the WWF then. And, when we got him, it was looked at as something of a coup, especially because he brought Ed Ferrara, who is a genius, and Bill Banks, also a genius. He brought them with him. It wasn't just Vince. It was Vince and Ed and Bill who came down from the WWF. And so, yeah, initially everybody was on board. But Vince was never the boss. Vince was just the booker. Mm-hmm. And people give Vince an awful lot of heat and shovel an awful lot of blame onto him for problems with the company. Now, if you say you didn't like the fat chick thriller Mike Awesome, well, that's Vince. But if you didn't like how house shows were laid out and how pay-per-views were promoted and all that, he wasn't the boss. He was just the booker.
Mm-hmm. Now, when did you feel like people started to turn on Vince?
To turn on Vince? Mm-hmm. Wow. Vince had this nasty habit of asking people to work. And a lot of the guys, when Eric was running things, the guys would come in and get contracts that would let them dictate not only the number of dates per year they would work. I mean, think Brock Lesnar in 2015 throughout the entire roster in 1998. And also they would dictate their storyline. Famously, when Vince came in, he had Ron and Don Harris as a team called Creative Control. There was a method to that madness because it drove him nuts. It drove everybody nuts. Like, you would ask Wrestler X, "You're doing the job for Wrestler Y tonight." "No, I'm not." "Okay, you got Creative Control, so I guess you're not doing the job tonight." That drives a booker insane. And so when Vince had finally had it, and when contracts were coming up, they would redo contracts, give them more money, but they would say, "You're not going to control what happens with your character. We are." And that's when people started turning on Vince, not knowing that he had, he would have done, they would have done fine with him. They would have made more money. They would have gotten over. Everything would have been fine. But the fact that they couldn't dictate when they would work and who they would job to and what storyline they would agree to, when they weren't in control, they didn't like it. And to their everlasting defense, I wouldn't like it either. But give announcers Creative Control, for God's sake. That's insane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think? I guess at this point in time, it wasn't just everyone that was Southern people. But do you think him having the New York accent and being from that area had anything? Did that rub people the wrong way?
It could have. I've never actually heard that question, but it could have. He's a brash guy. He's an abrasive guy. I'm from Georgia. I've never lived anywhere except Georgia in my entire life. And, but I don't care about that sort of thing. But a lot of people, hearing that Bronx honk come down and be the boss just rubs people the wrong way. But it didn't bother me. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I can see how it could bother some.
Inchman.
Yeah, I just was wondering, Scott, what did you think about Goldberg's use in WWE?
In WWE? Oh my God. Yeah. Terrible. Awful. Horrible. Keep this in mind. When the buyout happened, and I'm not knocking Goldberg. I love Goldberg. But when the buyout happened, think about this. I mean, you guys are old enough to remember. Mm-hmm. When they bought us out, should there ever have been a bigger angle than the invasion angle? Because you had ECW thrown in there too. Mm-hmm. They brought me and Arn and Stace out one night. They had Paul Lee come out and cut the promo on Vince. That angle, start to finish, should still be going today.
Yeah.
14 years later. And the problem is one person's fault, and that's Vince McMahon. He would not, in his dying breath, put over a WCW talent or an ECW talent. Now, men like Ray Jr. and Booker and Rob Van Dam, some guys got over in spite of Vince trying to bury them, but Vince's whole idea, and Paulie, of course, but Vince's whole idea was to bury both companies. It wasn't to make money by saying, oh my God, this is WCW versus WWE versus ECW. It was, this is WWE. Stop. WCW and ECW guys are job guys. That's all he wanted. That's all he saw, and he did not care that he was sitting on a $20 million profit. He was comfortable with a $2 million profit because he got to bury WCW and ECW.
There's here in the chat room, Kevin wants to know along those lines about that was a rumor about one of the WWE shows being turned into a WCW brand actually true?
Don't know. I heard the same rumor. I heard that it was. I've heard a couple of rumors. One that it was supposed to be me and King, and one that it was supposed to be me and Arn. Mm-hmm. Because I never heard Tony's name mentioned or Mike's name mentioned, but I heard those, but I never heard it from anybody in the WWF. And I can tell you right now, 100%, it would not have been me and anybody. I wasn't doing it. I did everything with them that they wanted, and that was more than I wanted. I was there for 2 weeks, and that was 13 days too much.
You want to talk about that experience? I mean, obviously it's memorable for you, and not in a good way.
Well, when they bought us out, they came down. A lot of the talent coordinators from the WWF came down and had meetings all day at the Ritz-Carlton up in Buckhead, a swanky section of Atlanta. And depending on if you were in-ring talent, if you were referee talent, if you were the crew, if you were the announce talent, that's who you met with. So I had my time scheduled, and I went and met with Ross at a suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead. And he said, and I'd known Jim for years, and he told me what was going on. I said, look, don't waste your time. I have no interest in working for the WWF at all in any capacity, period. And he said, are you sure about that? I said, I'm 1,000% sure. I said, I respect you too much. Forget it. I'm done. He goes, well, we've got an hour. I said, well, let's talk UWF. So I sat for like an hour with Jim Ross talking UWF in Mid-South. And because I told him, I said, don't waste your breath. I'm not coming. I don't want to. And out of nowhere, I got a call like 3 months later from Kevin Dunn saying they're going to do the invasion angle, and they want me in for 2 weeks, one in Tacoma to do a Raw and SmackDown, and as would have it, the next week in Atlanta for a Raw and SmackDown. And I said, okay, I'll do that. One trip to Tacoma, how horrible can it be? Well, it was Buff and Booker that first night with me and Arn and Stace coming down to the ring, and then me and Arn calling the match, which was a complete abortion. And what people forget is the next night we did SmackDown, which had Jindrak and O'Hare and Palumbo and Stasiak in some tag team there. And that was a fantastic match. But nobody remembers that. They remember how Buff and Booker just stuck up the entire West Coast that night on Raw. And they did. I remember sitting there with Arn as we're calling the match, and he's writing a note to me, and he just goes, in all caps, in a little pad, he goes, this sucks! Exclamation point, exclamation point. I'm like, nodding my head because we're off camera. And I'm like, this is the greatest match ever, and I'm nodding my head, yeah, this does suck.
Now, do you think that was set up to be a bad match, or why were those two guys picked?
Well, they were, and to their everlasting credit, they being the WWF, those are the two guys that I would have picked. Mm-hmm. I mean, they didn't have Sting, they didn't have Goldberg, they didn't have any of the bigger name guys yet. Those are the two of the bigger name guys they had available, and they were marketable. They were in good shape. They were, decent workers, but they came out and worked a WCW style match. They came out and were doing side headlocks and, body scissors and stuff like that. And this was supposed to be the match that's supposed to knock everybody out. Mm-hmm. And if memory serves, they didn't have a WWE agent lay the match out for them. I can't remember who it was that would have done it. Maybe they did it themselves. But the problem was, what they did in the ring wasn't horrible. It was just a WCW style, almost house show match, or third match into Nitro while the announcers have been putting over a pay-per-view, or Chucky's going to walk out in the next segment or something like that, instead of the match that's supposed to blow the lid off the building. Mm-hmm. And it was just horrible.
Mm-hmm. No, why?
And those are two guys that know how to work. Mm-hmm. Great guys. And if you had said go out and blow the roof off and and leave it in the ring, period, they would have done that. But they didn't get that instruction.
Mm-hmm. Why were you so against going to WWE even before doing that announcing?
Again, the real job. I've been to college for 1,000 years. I've worked really hard. I'm not leaving Georgia. I'm fine here. And they wanted me to quit my job. Okay. No way. They wanted me to move to Connecticut. Absolutely no way. And wanted me to take about, I guess in the overall scheme of things, about $100,000 a year pay cut. And absolutely 100% no way.
Yeah.
So no way. I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna move my family 3/4 of the way across the country to a state we've never lived in, just to share a duplex with Jonathan Coachman. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay right here in my nice big house right in Atlanta, and go to the office every day with my people that I love to work with. And no.
Mm-hmm. No.
Would you participate in any the network stuff? I know Tony Schiavone's done some of it.
Nah, no desire. I mean, honestly, guys, when I walked away from TNA in 2005, I knew that was it. I was 41 years old then. That was 10 years ago. I said, that's it. I'm too like Mel Gibson or Danny Glover and Lethal Weapon. I'm getting too old for this stuff. I walked away. That was fine. I'll just watch and like today. Not today. Yesterday, I'm telecommuting, so I can stay home and work. Which you can get. I don't know if you guys are allowed to do that at your job, but you can get like 8 weeks worth of work done in one day if you don't have people interrupting and the phone not ringing all day. Mm-hmm. And so while I'm doing that, all I do is watch old Georgia Championship Wrestling on my smart TV. So I'm watching like Paul Ellering with Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer setting up the last Battle of Atlanta with Tommy Rich, for like 3 hours. It was incredible. So yeah, I'd much rather do that than go out and try to convince people that Roman Reigns is the next big thing. No.
Uh-huh. Are there any current guys that you do when you watch it that you do enjoy?
Yeah, well, actually, I said that about Roman Reigns. Actually, I like all the guys in the Shield. The Wyatt family guys are entertaining to watch. But the guys out there now, it all goes, and like to bring this whole show full circle, it's all promos. When we had WCW, we had the Power Plant, and we brought in the bunch called the Natural Born Thrillers. Palumbo, Jindrak, Stasiak, Reno, Mike Sanders, all those guys, and with the exception of Sanders, they were all horrible promos. Mm-hmm. I mean, terrible. But they were great athletes, fantastic workers. I mean, you go back and watch that stuff, they were incredible workers, but they couldn't get a promo if you had a gun to their head. And other than Mike Sanders, he was the anomaly, and I think that guy could have been something if they had used him right. But it's like the Natural Born Thrillers are now the entire roster of the WWE, top to bottom. Great looking guys, average to fantastic workers, no promo ability. None. I think I mentioned on some discussion the other night that I had online that listening to Roman Reigns cut a promo has all the fire of a Dr. Ben Carson haiku reading. And that's probably being kind to both of them.
Yeah, there's just one of those guys actually from Sean O'Hare. I really thought could have been just a huge star. He just had a great look.
Oh yeah, he did, and he had the run. You go back and look, he had that run with Piper.
Yeah.
In the WWE with Piper as his manager or mentor or whatever that was. I hated that, but I love Sean. He's since passed away, and
yeah, that's too bad.
Caught up in everything else that happened to the guys we lost over the last 15, 20 years. But yeah, I thought Sean O'Hare was there. Chuck Palumbo was there. Chuck at least had the run with Billy Gunn, which was petered out really quickly.
Yeah, hold on. We're having some technical issues here.
Uh-oh.
I think we might have lost Insure. All right.
It might have been the mentioning of Reno.
It could be. He's Insure's notorious for his disdain of Reno. But
I love Reno. I kid Reno.
I liked Reno too. I miss him. I miss having another wrestling. I know there's Ring of Honor and everything, but I miss having another company that's really prominent in wrestling.
I'll tell you, Jack. This is no joke. I will tonight worried about the business, thinking that 5-7 years away from wrestling being like roller derby, where there's back to the smoke-filled room somewhere, and no TV outlets. That worries me.
Yeah, there was Do you have the network?
No. No.
All right. Yeah, but do you think they created the network for the reason that if they would ever lose TV, they would have a home?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a slam dunk, 100% lead pipe cinch. That if USA and the other broadcasts or cable networks rather, just wash their hands of it because of the headache and the expense and the really small profit margin on it, that they got somewhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sad thing is, next week, USA said, you know what, screw it, we're done. Your contract's up at the end of November. You're out. We're going to put, Murder, She Wrote reruns on for 3 hours on Monday night. Good luck. And they put Raw on the network. I think the network's numbers would go up. And they're going 8. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Because people just aren't going to follow it. They're not going to pay to watch that.
Yeah, especially if there's not a place to see it for free, then entice you to go and get the network.
Mm-hmm. True. Very true.
What did you think? I know there's been use of real life deaths before in wrestling, but what did you think of using Reid Flair's death on Raw this week?
Well, there's been so much made of that from Monday night with Charlotte and Paige, but
mm-hmm.
it's I can't say has the death of Ric Flair's son ever been used at an angle before? No. But has something as disgusting because it's real been used in a promotional angle before? Sure. You and I go back to the sheets. I go back all the way to the first issue of the Observer way back in the early 80s. And every year Dave would always have most disgusting promotional tactic
mm-hmm.
every year, and it was never a lack of nominees for that. And it was just like, what was the most disgusting of these 15 things that were all disgusting? So, the fact that it was that even that it's terrible, it's awful, but nobody does that sort of stuff anymore. I mean, Katie Vick, for God's sakes. Hunter accused Kane of murdering and I guess burying a high school cheerleader. I mean, for God's sake, that obviously wasn't real, but that's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get into, there have been other disgusting things like Blackjack Mulligan's heart attack, Fritz Von Erich, God, hell, all of the Von Erichs. God, there was a David and Mike Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions, for God's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
They named the show after the two dead guys, much less invoking the name of Reid Flair Monday Night on Raw. So now it's the fact that it's raising so many eyebrows means that wrestling might have actually not had to resort to that level of angle to get stuff over for so long, that this seems so disgusting when it's been, in the whole course of history, has been lapped several times in the disgusting category.
Yeah, I do think that's why it stands out more, is because it has been more, I don't even want to say PG, because I think wrestling's been almost always been PG, but more, just more safe. So when you have an angle like this, it really stands out. Mm-hmm.
It should be. You know what started all this stuff was Linda running for, I don't remember what office she was running for. I'm not a politics guy, but she ran for office, and this goes way back. And when she ran for office, the WWE corporate, hierarchy that I assume at the time she was the head of, we can't have, King going on and on and on about boobs, and we can't have women parading around with, basically a Band-Aid over their boobs covering themselves, and we can't do that anymore. We can't have blood. We can't have chair shots. We can't have this, that, and so they went to to PG, and, we're still there. Or maybe one day she'll get that out of her system and decide she doesn't want to be a politician, and we can go back to boobs and blood.
I'm a big fan. So, but now there is I actually really recommend this. It's a guest booker Disco Inferno, and it's hilarious. I don't know if you've seen it or not. But he's talking about all these different booking ideas he had in WCW, and it was Alien Invasion, Invisible Man, and
the Invisible Man. I've heard the Invisible Man thing. I've heard of Bill Ding. Did he mention the Bill Ding thing?
Bill Ding, which I believe he actually said was a Terry Taylor idea, not one of his.
Oh, so he's come full circle on that now. Because he initially said it was Terry's idea, then he claimed it. So I guess he's gone back to giving it to Terry.
But it's very entertaining.
Oh yeah, he's an entertaining guy. He's actually, Disco is like a college graduate, and really, to have a discussion with him, one of the smartest guys in wrestling. There are three guys in wrestling that I think are ridiculously smart that nobody gives credit for being so smart. I don't mean smart to the business as they would be good bookers or anything like that, but that's Disco, Cactus, and Scott Levy. Mm-hmm. All three guys, college graduates, all three guys really learned and intelligent and can carry on a discussion about any topic. And, if you watch their characters, none of them are portrayed as smart as the real men are. But those three guys, maybe the smartest guys I ever met in the business.
Mm-hmm. There was you mentioned the sheets a lot. You actually said you went back to the Observer to issue 1. Did you ever get any heat for that for reading the sheets?
Nah. I mean, by the time I got in there,
it wasn't. Yeah.
And I started in January '96. Nah. I mean, Mike was already there. Mike Tenay was already in WCW. He'd done the When Worlds Collide show by then with Chris Cruz. Mm-hmm. And, when I was doing Global, it was kind of a new thing to have somebody that had, been a sheet writer to be an announcer. But it wasn't that big of a thing. I mean, those days were rapidly, running away, that people were, not so much kayfabe, but just that the sheets were killing the business. That had kind of started to wane a good bit.
Mm-hmm. Just recently, it was just the other day, was Dave had a really nice tribute to Nick Bockwinkel, and he said that he was one of the first guys to embrace the Observer, and obviously Nick just passed away. Were you ever? I guess you were around him a little bit in WCW. Do you have any memories of Nick Bockwinkel?
I've only met him once at one of those Legends things, but people that I respect greatly all have universally unanimous great things to say about him. The time I met him, he was just a saint, just a great guy. Again, a really smart man who knew the business and who knew everything. I mean, you could talk to him about. It's like I read a quote from Bobby Heenan. I don't think it was in response to Nick's passing, but it was, if you asked Nick what time it was, he would tell you how to build a clock. I think that's probably a promo from the AWA days. But I can see that. I mean, he wouldn't tell you how to build a clock, but he's that smart and he's that gregarious. And everybody that I know that had a lot more interaction with him than I did had that to say about him. And I'm glad he had the life he did. Nobody gets out of here alive. Mm-hmm. Something's going to get all of us at some point. And he had a long, full life with success at the highest levels, and I'm very proud for him that he's left that legacy.
Yeah, we had him on the show a couple times. He was a great interview and a really nice guy to us. And, he was a little before my day, but I do remember I saw him in AWA in the later days of AWA, and even then, he was a great wrestler.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know why, but when I'm watching Georgia back in the early '70s, when Nick Bockwinkel would come in, it always seemed like it was like when Flair would come in the late '70s and early '80s. It was like, ooh, Nick Bockwinkel's going to be at the Atlanta City Auditorium, wrestling whoever was the number one, Bob Armstrong, and it was just something about him. When they would show footage of him or he would show up in the studio, he had, it's like what they used to say about The Rock. I don't know what it is, but he's got it. It was like Nick was the same way. I don't know what it is, but he had it. He wasn't like this jacked up, overly muscular guy, but he was in great shape. And just when he was in the ring, I didn't know what working was, but I knew that I enjoyed the matches he was in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, you say about having it. I met him at it was a NWA Legends Fan Fest, and even then, he's retired and everything. He definitely had this aura about him, like this was a special person.
Yep, I agree.
Interested on internet problems, but he does want to ask you what you thought about Big Show saying that WWE treated him better than WCW, and just along those lines too, how they still seem to bury WCW like on the network stuff and any type of DVDs.
Well, it's like war. If you go back and look at history, from my God, the Crusades through the Peloponnesian War, the American Revolution, the Civil War, up until the first Gulf War, whoever wins the war gets to write the history, whether it's true or not. And that's just the breaks. And we lost the war, so they get to write the history. Mm-hmm. And if Big Show, Big Show's getting paid by them, probably getting paid a lot of money. If he wants to come in and say, who sucked? WCW. Okay, I understand. You're still getting paid. And, when his contract's up and he's retired and he starts doing shoot interviews, he might come back and say, you know what, I take it all back. WCW really wasn't that horrible. That's okay. You win the war, you get to write the history.
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying there, but some of it is odd because they sell the network for you to. One of the points is like you can watch these Nitros and WCW pay-per-views, and if they tell you it all sucks, it's like, well, why do I want to buy it?
Welcome to the WWE corporate board meetings. I guarantee you that has been brought up. Why are we spending so much time burying most of our programming?
Uh-huh.
Who knows?
Yeah, I didn't watch many because I just couldn't really. I just didn't enjoy them. Was they had their Monday Night War show on there, and it was just how WCW is just like the shits. It was just terrible, and then Like, well, if it was so bad, well, how did it beat you for all this time? And,
Yeah.
and if so, it's like, well, what did that say about your company? I don't know.
Well, that old show that Road Dogg and Josh Matthews used to do on YouTube, on the WWE YouTube channel. I can't remember what it was called, but they were supposedly trapped in the basement watching old tapes and
it was
stuff.
like Mystery Science Theater 3000 kind of.
I'm sorry?
It was kind of like a play on it was like a play on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yeah. And they would always have, a segment on there about, something WCW screwed up. So if you watch just that, we didn't do anything right.
Yeah.
I mean, my golly, Judy Bagwell on the pole. Who's going to watch that? David Arquette. Nobody cares. And all that stuff. So if you just watch what the WWE puts out, we were, the worst wrestling promotion that ever existed, bar none. Forgetting, Eddie and Ray Jr. and Dean and Shane Douglas and Benoit before he went insane. And, all the tag team stuff that we did with Scotty and Rick and the Roadies and Harlem Heat and, and Public Enemy. And, forget all of that. Judy Bagwell on a pole. That's WCW. Didn't they suck? Don't you agree they sucked? And that's what you'll see.
Yeah. It's weird they'll even shoehorn some stuff in because they had this one show. It was pretty good. It was like rivalries, and I was watching. It's about Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair in the 80s. And I'm watching it, and it's cool. And they're showing stuff. Then just all of a sudden, they're just like, and then WrestleMania came, and was this huge thing, and put NWA out of business. And I was like, well, what's this have to do with what they're talking about? It had nothing to do with the story that they were talking about. Just like shoehorned in there. This is so
That's
strange.
Right. But they won. They won.
Yeah.
Their version is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I can accept that. That's the way it goes.
So, TNA, how did you get involved in TNA?
Well, WCW is over, and I'm back to work. And when Jeff Jarrett starts TNA, I had stayed in touch with Russo after WCW went under, and he had told me that he and Jeff had been talking and writing and everything, and at the time Vince wasn't acknowledged as a part of that creative team, and he was from the very beginning. And he told me, he had a store, like a CD warehouse store near my house in Marietta. That's what he did when WCW went under. He opened a CD warehouse place, selling used CDs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're going to have this big show in Huntsville. It's going to launch the company. So I called Tony Schiavone, and I said, we got to go. He said, you know what? We do. I'll come pick you up and we'll go. So he came over to my house and picked me up. And I think me and him and Prazak actually rode over to Huntsville, Alabama for that first TNA show, which was, it was different, but that's what it needed. It was different. It wasn't the WWE light. And, from then they did fine. And out of nowhere, Vince calls me one day and says, we've got this young lady named Goldilocks that we're using as a backstage interview, and she's spectacularly good looking and really talented, and we were wasting her holding a mic. We wanted to do something different with her. Can you come in and do backstage interviews for a while so we can pull her out and make her a character? So, of course. So I would go to Nashville every Wednesday to do those live pay-per-views, and got to know Goldie, who I still to this day consider a great friend. And she became a character, and I just did backstage there, and that was it. I would go up and just see my friends and, work out stuff with the guys to do backstage, and it was fun. And when they moved from Nashville to Orlando, I said, that's it. I can drive to Orlando. I drive to Nashville. It's like 2.5 hours, but Orlando is like 10 hours. Forget that.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Mm-hmm. I liked Goldilocks too. Former guest on the show, we had her on, but I thought she was great.
Yeah, she is awesome. One of the most impressive people I met in the business. She's got her head on straight and immensely talented.
Mm-hmm.
Think the world of her.
And I'll never say those old TNA shows are perfect by any means, but there's a lot of great stuff on them, and they were a lot of fun. The weekly interviews.
Absolutely. I mean, and for the longest time, it seemed like I hit at the right time with them. It was like, what 1980s or 90s relic is going to come running in during this show? And that was always fun. Because you had the roadies come in, you had Lex come in out of nowhere. And
it was like one of the Moondogs, I think, came in.
The Moondogs came in, yeah. I mean, Nikita came in once, and it was fun.
Mm-hmm. Do you still watch? Do you still keep up with TNA?
Yeah, that's on my TiVo too. I'll watch along here as they go, and they've got fantastic talent too. You know, just like Ring of Honor and New Japan. You know, so that's the three that are always on my TiVo that I just never have a chance to watch. But when I can find the time, and actually this weekend will be the first time. So I'll watch all three shows this weekend from Ring of Honor, TNA, and New Japan.
Yeah. Did you watch Lucha Underground at all?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, can't wait for season 2.
Yeah, that's actually was probably my favorite.
Love Lucha Underground. Great show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was probably my favorite wrestling show last year. Was that, and if someone would explain it to me, I'd probably think, "Oh, that sounds terrible." But if
yeah,
but that was
the production values on Lucha Underground. My God, are so far and away better than Ring of Honor, TNA, and New Japan, which aren't bad.
Mm-hmm.
But but then again, it's a TV show. It's not a wrestling show, so they do it the right way. But again, they're only having to do what? Not even 20 shows a year.
Mm-hmm.
And television shows, not even that, is it? It's like 16 shows a year, as opposed to one show per week.
Mm-hmm.
So they can devote the time to the production values that they need to do, and that might be where wrestling is going. After all is said and done.
Mm-hmm. That was everyone always says it's revolutionary, but that was actually the first wrestling show I think in years that really was revolutionary. Was completely different than any other wrestling company.
No, I agree with you 100%. Yeah, nobody's ever seen anything. It's not so much the lucha libre style, which it is. Mm-hmm. It is that, but it's not that's revolutionary. You can go find that on Telemundo or Univision or whatever. But it's just the way they produce the show and the storylines and the way they bring everything almost on this common thread that runs through the whole show. It's just a wonderful show. Love Lucha. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always say on the show, if people hear about it and if it does sound like something they wouldn't like, because I would think a lot of old school wrestling fans would hear what it's like and probably not think it's going to be good, but just give it a shot and watch it. It's
oh yeah, I agree. It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm. We had Jim Cornette on a few times, and he just won't watch it. I think you might like it. Just give it a shot. But
well, I'll say this. If there's one person
that might not
a handful of people that wouldn't enjoy it, I'd probably put him in that list.
That's probably I think that's probably fair to say. Yeah.
I mean, there's no Ron Wright on that show in a wheelchair, coming out after 3 weeks or 3 months, and that kind of old school Southern wrestling promotion and booking. That's not there at all.
Yeah. Well, Conan was in a wheelchair for a little bit, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, that's true. That's true. Mm-hmm. That's true, actually. Yeah, that's right. Maybe Cornette would enjoy it.
You just need a wheelchair on the show, and it's all good.
Yeah, you bring a wheelchair in, you got Cornette. You're in.
So you're, have you ever worked with Jim Cornette, actually?
Believe it or not, there is a video, I guess it's on YouTube, it might be on Daily Motion or Vimeo or something like that, of a USA Championship Wrestling show at the fairgrounds in Nashville. This was before TNA turned it into the Mecca. It was the USA Championship Wrestling group that Burt Prentice ran in Nashville. And get this, it was me and Jimmy doing commentary on Dusty Rhodes versus Jerry Lawler in Nashville. And I will watch that to this day, and I'm like, which one of those 4 guys doesn't belong there? And it's me. But I held my own. It was pretty fun. It was great fun. It was pretty good, good commentary, a fantastic match, told the story. People went home happy. It was the main event on that show, full house. So, yeah, I worked with Cornette a ton. And he's hysterical. I mean, you've had him on the show, I'm sure. He's exactly like you would think he would be. He's not putting on an act. He's nuts. He's hysterical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's one of the best characters ever in wrestling. And he isn't really a character, he's just himself. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Scott Wentz wants to know, who is more enjoyable to work with, Larry Zbyszko or Lee Marshall?
Never worked with Lee. He's also passed away, but I never was in the same room with him. Legend and I worked together, God, several hundred times. I mean, I love working with Legend. Mm-hmm. He was, I'll put it this way. If you watch the television shows from back in the late 90s, early 2000s until we went under, you would think that Larry, Legend, was this curmudgeon, no fun, always making faces and just angry all the time and bitter and jaded, and that Bobby Heenan was the life of the party. Well, the truth of the matter was it was the other way around. Bobby was angry a lot and a curmudgeon and bitter and jaded, and Legend was the life of the party. He could crack him up just walking in the room sometime. And I love working with Larry. I stayed friends with him. I'm friends with him till this day. Mm-hmm. He is just so fun to hang out with. He's met, he's come to my house and, everything else. He's fantastic. I love Legend. He was a lot of fun to work with. Mm-hmm. Lee, I can't tell you. I never met him. I enjoy his work. He was an immensely talented guy, and he had that voice that was going to carry him, throughout his life, and it did. But I never got a chance to work with him or meet him even. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we never had Lee Marshall on the show, but I think Larry still holds a record for most appearances by a wrestler on In Your Head. He's one of my favorites. Larry Zbyszko's the man.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And did he? I don't want to bring this up but did he ever try to get you on his hair product?
I think the hair ship had sailed for me years ago. I mean, people. I'll go to like a class reunion, or I'll see somebody from my hometown, and my wife's family. My family's all passed away, but my wife's family is big as all outdoors, big as the Von Erichs. And we'll go down there to visit them, and I'll see somebody I graduated high school with, and they'll go, "My God, you haven't changed a bit." And I'll say, I'll take that one of two ways. Number one, thank you. Or number two, I looked 51 when I was 21, which was the last time you saw me. But no, the hair left town about the time the old virginity did. So that's that's a long trip.
Again, we could take that one of two ways. No. There was
yes, thank you.
There was what is here was ribs. People always like to ask about ribs. Were you ever part of any ribs in wrestling? I don't know if do they rib the commentators?
No, they didn't really rib us too, but I got to see a few of them, and I pulled one time. It was just hysterical. I got to tell you, Gene Okerlund is one of the funniest human beings alive. If you ever get a chance, and I don't know if he's ever done your show or if he even does this kind of thing.
Yeah, we had him on once. Mm-hmm.
You did?
Yeah.
He's hysterical. Mm-hmm. He can, he's one of those guys like I was talking about Mark. You could just, read names out of the phone book and you'd crack up. So there was a group of us that when Nitro would end at 11, nobody was a big partier. We'd go back to the room, sleep, and catch the first flight out. I did it because I had to be at work in Atlanta at 8 o'clock. So I'm catching like the 5:30 flight from Chicago or whatever. But whatever, there was a group of us that was always on the first flight, and Gene was part of them. So one morning, that group of us, and Scotty Steiner was always one of them. And so I'm sitting in the airport, and it's basically just us, because it's 5:30 in the morning. And I'm sitting next to Scott, and Gene is over on the other side of the concourse. He had apparently had a few cocktails the night before, so he's in the dark at 5:30 with his sunglasses on. And so this cleaning guy that's got one of these little buffer things running around the airport comes over to us, and he's sitting there with I don't know, Kevin Nash is over there and Scotty and I don't know who all these big stars. And he comes up to me for some reason and says, "Isn't that one of those wrestling announcers over there?" I said, "Right over there?" And he goes, yeah, isn't he a wrestling announcer?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "What's his name?" I can't remember his name. I said, "That's Jerry the King Lawler." He goes, yeah, that's it, Jerry the King Lawler. So he goes over to Gene, and he gets out his pad and stuff, and he goes, "Excuse me, Mr. Lawler, can I have your autograph?" And, and so Gene, who was on like 2 hours sleep and probably still blowing about a .26, just looks up and says, "You got the wrong guy, pal." So the guy comes back to me and he goes, "What did you say his name was?" I said, "That guy right over there." And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "That's Bobby the Brain Heenan." Bobby the Brain. Yeah, that's right. Bobby the Brain Heenan. That's right. Yeah, so off he goes again. And he says, "Excuse me, Mr. Heenan, can I have your autograph?" He goes, "Take a hike, pal." It's a guy down the hallway. Oh, boy.
That's awesome.
So, here we are picking on hungover Gene Okerlund at, 5:30 in the morning.
Uh-huh. I did meet him at because I also do a lot of horror movie stuff on another show.
Yeah.
And so I was press at Mad Monster Party 2013 in Charlotte, and so on I think it was Sunday they were doing a Q&A, and it was or maybe it was Saturday, but it was Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper, and it was Mean Gene was going to actually be the moderator, which was awesome. And I was there when Hogan came in. He went to his room. And later at night, we were down doing karaoke, my friend Annabelle and I went to get us a drink at the bar, and here Gene Okerlund was in there. It was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and he had many cocktails, but he was still at the at doing the moderating the next morning, a few hours later. So I was very impressed by, and this was just a couple years ago.
So one night, Nitro's over. We, head back to the airport, the first flight in the morning. And it seems like, I don't know why I got in my head, this is like a West Coast thing because there were more people than normal there. I mean, Chicago to Atlanta, at 5:30, it's just us and nobody else. But it seemed like this was a West Coast because it was everything was kind of buzzing out there. So we get on the shuttle bus from the rental car joint back to the terminal. And the shuttle bus is full of people. Nobody knows who I am. And nobody gives a shit about me. But, here's Gene sitting across from me. And I had given him a ride back to the airport. So he gets on, and the people won't leave him alone. Hey, Mean Gene. Hey, Mean Gene. So all of a sudden, he pulls out his cell phone out of nowhere. Doesn't ring, which is the old wrestler's trick. You guys have heard it. Pulls out his cell phone. Hello? Oh, my God. Oh. Well, I don't know what to say. He was a damn good dog. And so Gene starts working this one-sided phone conversation like the old Bob Newhart bit about his dog dying back at home. And is talking to his wife, his kid, his maid, whatever it was, about his dog dying and how to arrange for the funeral and get the vet out there, get an autopsy done, and he's talking really loud. And I'm over here just doubled up with tears running down my face because I know he's working them. And all of these fans are just like, "Oh, my God, Gene Okerlund's dog just died." And knowing full well there's nobody on the phone except him. And so we end up pulling back into the terminal, and they're like, "Here's our first stop. This is, Delta, American, JetBlue, and these people are getting off and all coming up to Gene, and Gene still has his sunglasses on, of course, and is pretending to cry. And these people, "I'm sorry about your dog, Mr. Okerlund." "Mean Gene, I'm sorry about your dog." And he's just nodding his head, holding his eyes, and I'm just howling. It's everything I could do to keep from pissing my pants. All these fans who were so well-meaning, offering him condolences about his dead dog. And I'm sure, the infancy of the internet, it was probably the big story of the day. Gene Okerlund finds out dog died on, rental car shuttle bus trip.
Oh man, Bob, that's a great story.
Oh God, he was and is nuts. I love Gene. He's hysterical.
Yeah.
Can I say one more story?
Of course.
This was before I worked for WCW, when they were still doing the Clashes, the Clash of the Champions. The storyline they were doing at the time was Colonel Robert Fuller, when he was doing the Colonel Parker gimmick, like the old Tom Parker with Elvis bit, with the off-white tux and the bolo tie and all that. Mm-hmm. And I think he's managing Harlem Heat. Anyway, whoever he's managing, he's managing Ming. Mm-hmm. So he's managing Ming against Sid, and the storyline was if Sid beats Ming, he gets 5 minutes with Colonel Parker. So Sid, beats Ming, so he gets 5 minutes with Colonel Parker. So this is going to be a complete massacre in 20 seconds. So Fuller gets in the ring. Sid, gut shots him, butterflies him, doubles him up top into the power bomb. And while he's up there, and Sid's vicious is like 9 feet tall, so Parker's not used to taking that kind of bump, so he gets way ass up there. And Sid, who's strong as an ox, holds him forever. And while he's up there, Parker, and you may have to bleep this out, shits his pants because he's so scared. And Sid just plants him. And Sid notoriously doesn't protect other guys, but you can imagine if you got your ass in his face and you shit your pants, he's going to protect you even less than he does, which is like getting into the negative numbers. So he just kills Fuller. And the crowd pops, and he's in this off-white tux, Fuller is, and you can just see this huge stain come on the back of his tux. And so Tony and whoever else are calling the match, and he goes, "Oh, so Colonel Parker's been destroyed by Sid Vicious. Let's send it back to our colleague standing by with Harlem Heat. Here's Mean Gene Okerlund." And they send it back to Gene, and "I thank you very much, my longtime close personal friend, Tony Schiavone." And about that time, Parker walks by, heading back to the dressing room on the floor by the ramp, and Gene smells him. And Gene looks down, completely breaks whatever momentum he had, and he goes, "Colonel Parker, you been eating birdseed?" So that happened, and so we're doing Nitro, and this is like 5 or 6 years later, and I'm doing Nitro, whatever, and I meet up with Gene, and I'm like, "Hey, Gene, I got to ask you something. Parker shits himself when Sid powerbombs him on the Clash in Fort Bragg or whatever, and when he walks by you, you stop him and say, 'Hey, Colonel Parker, you've been eating birdseed. What does that mean?'" And he just looked at me and he goes, "Scott, a man shit himself on live television. You got to say something."
Now it makes total sense. So.
Oh my God! I'm saying that's Gene. Like, people will say, "Oh, I love Mean Gene." Like, you don't know Mean Gene. That's Mean Gene. That guy is hysterical.
That's a great story.
That's a complete shoot too. I mean, I bet you dollars to no nuts that footage isn't out there anywhere. Mm-hmm. Of Parker shitting himself. That's got to be long gone. Uh-huh. Maybe if you got the network, you can go find the Clash. But boy, howdy.
Uh-huh. Oh well, you know what? I think eating birdseed's a good way to end this interview tonight. I don't think we can top it. It's been awesome to talk to you, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Anytime, guys. It's always a pleasure, especially when we can talk Mean Gene stories. I'll see if I can think of some more.
All right. That'll next time we have Scott on, it's going to be just 2 hours of Mean Gene stories.
2 hours of Mean Gene. Set your clock. Excellent. Call your cable company.
Well, honestly, though, thanks. It's been great. Really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. All right. Well, yeah. We'll be back here. I'll try to get into it, and we'll wrap up the show. And again, thanks, Scott Hudson, for coming on.
Hey, humanoids, get out that rental stuff and put down that can of warm sauce and that big fat old lady you're working at that's yelling for you to eat dinner. This is Bobby the Brain Heenan. I'm in your head, and I'm online at .com. So get with it, or I'm moving next door to you. You won't like it, because you like your wife. I guess you would like it.
Hey, everybody, this is Goldilocks. You are listening to two of the most gorgeous, entertaining guys in your head, online.com.